of now responding to service delivery and the whole spectrum of public finance management. Maybe Joshua.
Yeah, I think also you've done you've quite expounded what austerity measure is, but I would like to break it down to a household. If you go back to a household when things are tough, when let's say the man of the house has lost the job or the woman of the house has lost the job, most of the time you resort towards minimizing your expenditure. You resort towards cutting down the unnecessary spending that is not needed on a day-to-day basis, things that is not food, things that is not shelter, things that is not the basic things that run a particular household. Now, if you take that now to our national setting, we are at a situation where that our government finds it's very difficult to raise enough revenues. At the same time, there is pressure which comes from a very high demand of public services and another very high demand of settling the public debt that we've been borrowing recklessly. And this is the situation where we are in. It's another situation where we're in similar to the 80s, where we were at, the economy was so bad under the regime of President Moi. And what happened then is that, there was massive cut down of government recruitment. There was cutting down of provision of particular services. They halted the hiring of public servants and all the other measures. But now, if you look at the situation where we are in right now, yes, we are back to the austerity measures, but these austerity measures, in how the government is angling the measures that they're applying, the policies, there is a pressure to raise more revenues. So what they do is that they'll bring us the conversation of increasing the tax bracket. And increasing the tax bracket means for the government to continue to pressing down those who don't have the money. Is continue to increase more taxes to the poor of the community. This, targeting the small businesses, targeting the household commodities, things that are affected by the VAT, which is a very, very regressive form of taxation. And then on the other side, the government is so lazy in terms of fighting corruption at the same time. In Kenya, I can say that we don't have a revenue problem. The problem that we have is an expenditure problem. According to the EACC data, we lose about 608 billion every year to corruption. And this is money that, we are targeting in terms of what we are looking at raising and in terms of the budget deficits. This is, if you take what we are losing and what we are having in form of deficits and what we are looking at in terms of raising from taxes, like last year's Finance Bill 2024, when it was rejected, the estimate was that finance bill was to raise us around 350 billion. That is half of what we lose to corruption. That is half of what we lose to wastage in terms of operations and maintenance. So our priorities in terms of austerity measures are very, very misplaced. And this one is not something that comes and goes easily. It is something that is there until we come out of the economic distress that we are in. At the moment, the government is cutting down in terms of employment of teachers, in terms of placement of the doctors. You've seen the menace that was there by the hiring of the last of the intern, the doctors that are supposed to be coming in as interns. You've seen the problem that is there with education financing. You see, this is austerity measure that the government is really pressing hard in terms of service delivery, forgetting that austerity measure should not mean to cut down on service delivery. Austerity measure should mean to cut down on unnecessary government expenditure in terms of why do we need a $500 million budget for cakes and entertaining guests at the Deputy President office? Why do we need a heavy budget for travel expenditure? Why do we need a heavy budget for doing things that are not directly related to service delivery? In essence, I think, yes, we are at a very bad place as a government, but in a place where we put ourselves by the reckless borrowing that has been there. But then instead the government saving itself by cutting down unnecessary expenditure, they are punishing the citizens for their own bad choices. So we are in a very, very bad fix when you talk about the the austerity measures. I don't know, but I would like to continue on, but I think Elizabeth has something else to add.
Yeah,
Yes,
maybe
Elizabeth.
just to add something, a bit, something small for the sake of our viewers, in terms of better understanding this, is that the situation we are in as a country right now is that we are also borrowing to repay loans. Yeah, so we are not borrowing maybe for development purposes. And when we are doing this, then there are conditions from the people who we are borrowing from to put up these austerity measures. And that is why during the recent protest on finance bill, there was also conversations about IMF, because we borrow from IMF, and whether they are imposing this on government, or whether now we are responding to them, or we are answerable to them. So that the austerity measures also comes as a result of the conditions for borrowing, so that the person who is lending you is assured that you'll be able to repay the monies. So it is also a direct consequence of the borrowing that we are doing, and also the conditions that the lenders are putting. So like right now, there are several conditions that the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has put in place for the government of Kenya to be able to now access the loans that we are borrowing from them. And one of them, of course, is looking at the issue of privatization of the parastatals. We have a lot of parastatals in Kenya, and most of them are not performing. And this is going to be a huge burden for Kenyans, because we are paying people working in these spaces, and maybe they are not even generating revenues. So one of the conditions that was put, and if you have been following the news, is that there is now these conversations about the privatization bill, and this conversation of Adani coming in to JKIA. So there are those measures that have been put in place, so that then now we are able to receive the funding that we are borrowing. Of course, another one that we are seeing is, of course, on the institutions of learning. There was also that conversation that, hey, can you look at your higher institutions of learning? Yeah, can you do something about them, because some are not performing. And then now there's introduction of these performance management contracts that, of course, if you want to be funded by the government, they'll be looking at how you are performing. So all these conversations around austerity measures are also as a result of the conditions that are being put in place by the people we are borrowing from. And we are really borrowing from, of course, the IMF. The other people we are borrowing from, of course, of course, they also have the conditions they are putting in place, and then now this responds to the issues of austerity measures. Yeah.
Wow. I don't know if I would like to add something there.
It's okay, you can add.
Because at the moment, just back to the setting of the household, when you realize you're as a person, you're in economic distress, you have family, you have children, you have your wife there. You're looking at, you cannot start buying a new car, whereas at the same time your children do not have fees. You cannot say that we are prioritizing to buy, we are saving to buy a particular land, whereas at the same time your children are sleeping hungry. It shows poor planning on your end, and it shows that your priorities are not right. And in essence, this is what I'm seeing in our country. We have Article 43 of the Constitution that speaks of the basic human rights. How can we, the Constitution anchors our human rights, and at the same time, it protects them. How does it protect them? By the Chapter 12 of the Constitution, where now the government should actualize the attaining of these particular rights through proper budgeting that is responsive, that has a direct linkage to the basic human rights. When you're talking to Article 43, you're talking of education, water, sanitation, you're talking about healthcare, all right? So when you're reading our budget should have a direct linkage from Article 43 to Chapter 12 of the Constitution. When we are raising taxes, all right, is this tax just? Is there accountability? Is this particular tax meeting the provisions of the rule of law? Or is this tax just going to punish a particular sector of the economy and let the other group languishing in inequality? So we have had a series of government planning, of government budgeting, or government priorities that are not directly linked to provision or to protection of the basic human rights. And that's why the priorities that are there includes very capital intense development projects. And that's why we end every year, we have particularly earmarked or specific earmarked projects that are not directly linked towards delivery of public service. And what this does is that government carefully maps them out, or particular politicians carefully mark them out, so that they can have a justification to go and borrow and make it look as our need. Whereas in essence, we don't need some of this debt that these people go to borrow out there. Forgetting that debt is not agreed on a human rights basis. Debts are agreed on business terms. If you don't pay, you're going to suffer.
Yes.
And that is where we are right now. That we have a president that is in a fix where he would rather not pay the salary of teachers, not pay the salary of civil servants, and use that money to pay public debt, because debt is not anchored on human rights. Debt is anchored on business terms. And what we've had for the last, let's say, 15 years, we've had reckless borrowing that we've been entering into agreements, all right? Agreements that are, it's an agreement in the name of the sovereign, that we cannot fail to pay this particular debt, because when the president goes to borrow, they borrow in the name of the sovereign. They borrow in the name of the republic. The signature that is there is that the government of Kenya, the Republic of Kenya, is going to pay this particular debt.
You're raising a very strong point, especially now when it comes to when the government is going to borrow. And one question that a person will ask, are the citizens informed about all this? Where is the place of citizens in just receiving information about tax, about borrowing? Where can we access this information, and are the citizens informed?
Yep, I think I was going towards that,
yes.
But I'll just speak for short minutes, and then I think Duya has something to add on that. But in essence, you see, the government goes to borrow in the name of the sovereign.
Yes.
In essence, that is debt. When it matures, we must pay. Whether it is debt that we borrowed and we used it properly, or we didn't use it, or it ended up in people's account, we must pay. And if you borrow money to do something for your own self and you use that money in a wrong way, that does not make it a bad debt. It is as legitimate as how you went to borrow it and the commitment that you made towards that particular debt. But the problem that we have is that the government, whatever, as per the structure that we have right now, the only approval that they need is that they need to demonstrate a need. They need to demonstrate that there is a particular project that needs to be funded. And they go to parliament, and the parliament approves particular debt ceiling. You can borrow up to this amount. And when the parliament is approving these particular limits, they do not appraise the project. Where did the money go when we borrow money to build the Aror and Kimorel Dam? Where did this 27 billion went to? Where did the money go when we borrowed to do the Galana Kulalu project? Where did the money go? The parliament is totally blind towards the utilization of countries' debt. They don't appraise using the KPIs, key performance indicators. Do we have cost efficient? Did we have economy use of this particular money? Did we have benefit? Did the taxpayer benefit for this particular project? Then why are you coming to ask for more? We have two particular officers of the parliament that are supposed to help the parliament appraise these particular debts. One of them is the control of budget. She is confused to be the office of the president, but no, she reports to the parliament with a copy of the report to the president. And she is supposed to give a report on how the expenditure, how the government is utilizing particular money in every quarter of the year. Another officer is called the Auditor General, who is supposed to give every year budget reports on how government is spending money, the national and the county government. But in essence, they look like the officers of the president and not the officers of the parliament. And these are the officers that the parliament has been given by the constitution to help them appraise government expenditure. But we've seen a clear government blatant disregard of these two offices. Yes, they keep on producing reports, but these reports, do they inform any borrowing? Do they inform any budgeting? Do they inform anything in that parliament? All right, I'll let Elizabeth to add to that conversation.
Thank you very much. I'll just come in at the point of where is the citizen in all these conversations. So where are we? So if you look at the Constitution again, the Constitution provides for first right to access information under Article 35. So that's the law, that we have a right to get this information. Another right that the Constitution gives us under Article 10 is, of course, on public participation.
Absolutely.
And it's an anchor. It's a really important provision that government officials or any public official should not take a decision without involving the citizens. And that is where now the problem is. If you have seen the uprising, if you have seen the protests, it is because of a public participation gone wrong. It was not done the right way. People are asking for information. People are demanding to be involved in these decisions that we are talking about. If you are going to take, if you are going to borrow monies on behalf of the Republic of Kenya, that means that we are also responsible for your actions. Then the law says that you should actually take measures to inform these people, also to get their views on what the actions you are doing. So we see a gap in Kenya in terms of public participation. We do not have proper mechanisms to involve the citizens. Citizens' views are not taken seriously, as you have seen in the recent protest that we had. The citizens were saying, we do not want this bill. It is so retrogressive, it is so harsh for us. And then we see that, of course, the government was going ahead to approve this, and it ended up in chaos. So in as much as the law has given us the right, we, the citizens of Kenya, feel that these rights are not being properly executed. The government has been taking us for a ride for quite some time, that when we attend public participation processes, then our views are not really taken well, or we don't get the feedback why the views were not incorporated into the government policies. And then on now access to information, it is practically very difficult to get information on some of these decisions that government is making. I think up to now, people have been wondering what went wrong or what happened in the SGR deal. You know, we have been asking for the contracts, we have been asking for the information. What we heard was that the amount involved in the SGR deal was inflated. Yeah, was so much inflated. What happened? What happened to this? So we have a problem in Kenya. In as much as the law has given us the rights, then the implementation or the realization of the right to access to information and also public participation is not really being well executed. So we get a gap there, and because the citizen is now aware of their rights, we see a lot of people coming out to demand that we be involved effectively and meaningfully. You know, not just ticking a box, that you called people in a place and told them about what you are going to do. People are actively now coming up to demand for effective public participation, effective or meaningful involvement in these decision-making processes, because at the end of the day, we talked about the social contract. It is our money. It is us, the citizens, who will be affected. And when it comes to debt, it is the Republic of Kenya that is going to pay. And the Republic of Kenya means the citizen, our children, you know, us, and even the generations to come. Because right now we are talking about loans or debts that were taken long time ago that now are maturing and we are paying. So there is a need to really look at our mechanisms for engaging citizens. I'm aware now that there are conversations in the Office of the Attorney General to develop a proper framework for citizen participation, because we do not have a proper framework. You know, the law can give you a right, but you need a framework to tell you how are you going to realize this right. So in Kenya right now, we do not have that law that specifically tells us how we should do public participation. So it is a right in the law, but how do you realize this right? You know, what are the mechanisms? How do you say that public participation has taken place for you now to move forward with a decision, maybe as a president of the Republic of Kenya or as an officer who is making decisions on behalf of the public in Kenya? So we have that gap, but of course I've said that there are conversations around now having that mechanism in place. So we have those challenges. In terms of the decisions that are being made, we have very little or limited information to even now demand. Yeah, so yes.
Can I add something on
Okay,
that?
okay,
I don't know.
Okay, it's
fine.
But
But speaking on the voices of the citizen as well, most of the time it's a double-edged sword. And they say the voice of the people is the voice of God. And also, let's go back to the Bible, because I believe Christians are watching us and others.
Yes.
You may want to familiarize yourself with the story of Samuel, and when people were demanding, they were saying, they had Samuel, they had prophets and judges who were leading them, and then they said, "Man, we want to be like other nations. We want a proper king." All right. So even God was like, "Man, if these people they have said this, then I'll give them what they want." All right. When you come sometime afterwards, these people, Barnabas was brought before them, and then Jesus Christ was brought before them. Do you know what the people said? They said, "Crucify the man who gave them bread some few months ago. He fed them bread and all that." But they said, "This man who has totally done nothing to them, crucify him."
Yes.
We want to pass a lot of blame to the government. We want to pass a lot of blame to the politician. But then at the same time, we are always giving citizens information. This politician has been implicated in public corruption cases. Do not elect them. But then at the same time, these citizens will tell you, at least he comes and he shares the process of corruption with us. Do you think this man who stole from public kitty, when they are elected to make a decision about your water, about your access to healthcare, first of all, to begin with, they stole money so that they can be able to vie for a political seat. Now they have a political power to allocate budget, because that is what politics is. Politics is about authoritative allocation of resources. All right? Resources in a country. Who gets what, when, and how. This man has integrity issues. This man has been accused of murder. This man or this woman has been accused of public theft. But this becomes our favorite in terms of choosing who is going to become our MP, our governor, our president, our deputy president. So it is time that the citizens get back to their senses. It all boils down to the public participation is not at the point of budget process alone. The public participation is massively affirmed at the point of the vote. That is where our voice is known. That is where we express our desire. If we elect leaders who are selfish, who have no regard of chapter 6 of the Constitution, and we expect that this chapter 6, they have not at least met the threshold of chapter 6 of the Constitution, leadership and integrity, and we expect somehow they will be able to have chapter 12 of the Constitution meeting the provisions of the rights of the citizens, then we are lying to ourselves as citizens. The buck stops with us on how we formulate a state that will make proper decisions regarding our taxes that we give, that we entrust them. That is what I wanted to add with regards to the citizens.
Yes, yeah. quite interesting. And bringing out the issue of corruption.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about matters accountability, there comes the issue of, as a country, we are really struggling with corruption.
Yeah.
And so do we budget for corruption as a country? Or is it something that just comes from nowhere?
Absolutely. we budget for corruption. It is budgeted. I told you recently that the projects that we have, these people, they want to make you feel like we need an expressway. All right? In essence, what we need is a road that will ease the traffic from Nairobi to Nakuru.
Nakuru, okay.
They'll tell you that we need an SGR. Is it that the citizens need this particular... What study showed that we need an SGR from Mombasa to Nairobi? All right? Instead of a highway, all right, a two-dual carriage that will take us from Nairobi to Mombasa. You see, they will make you feel as if you need this particular... They are done a deal. They are making us feel as if it is in our behalf. You know, the expressway, let us go back to the expressway. That was made because of business people who are arriving in JKIA and they want to get to Westlands in less than 30 minutes. They want to get to other places of the city in less than... That's why they proposed the PPP. And if you interrogate that particular deal, there were so many malpractices that were there. And that is also what happens with how we do our budgets. The citizens do not appraise the budgets enough. We come at the tail end when the budgets are being approved. But when the budgets are being formulated, the projects are being put there, which are not in any way related to service delivery. They are made to look as service delivery, made to look as a need to the citizens, and these projects are carefully mapped so that they can provide an avenue for back dealings. SGR, let's say a clean project, as we were told by other quarters, it would have costed around 50 billion. But because of interest, another 50 billion was added, another 50, another, and we were to close to around 350, something that we are paying for, and it is not exporting Kenya produce out of the country. Have you seen SGR carrying out what we manufacture in other countries? It is being used for other for other countries who want to have their produce arrive in Mombasa and spread in East Africa as fast as possible. And that's why they are forcing everyone to use that SGR.
Okay, just to add on the budgeted corruption aspect.
Yes.
If you look at reports from the Auditor General and also maybe Controller of Budget, how does budgeted corruption manifest in our country? Then you look at the inflation of prices in terms of now the costing. So previously in some reports we have seen that maybe the cost of a pen, ordinarily we know that a pen would be 10 shillings. Then if you look at those reports, you see that the price of the pen was inflated, maybe to even 100 shillings or 200 shillings. So budgeted corruption has been happening in Kenya in terms of first inflating the prices of commodities or projects that we are implementing, and also just having those projects that we cannot really ascertain where they are. They are somehow fixed in the budget. And the gap we are talking about is now the aspect of public participation, where citizens now do not have sufficient time to interrogate the budget documents and actually ask the right questions. So as we are saying that the gap in public participation then also contributes to exacerbate that aspect of budgeted corruption, and we end up losing a lot of money, and then we end up, of course, having these conversations around public debt, budget deficits, and so on and so forth. So it's also a reflection of that.
And just talking about budgeted corruption, as Gen Z, myself, I am a Gen Z, and when the Gen Z were going out on the streets, one of the biggest challenges that they were asking if we can just resolve as a country is corruption. And so what will be the place where now we can say, even for the Gen Zs, so that we don't, as a country, when we want the government to listen to us, we don't have to always go to the streets. Are there policies that can be put in place whereby now as citizens we can be involved in what we are calling public participation? Even for the Gen Z, and how does even matters corruption affect unemployment? Because the Gen Zs are also affected really by unemployment in this country.
So let me begin, then I'll give Joshua to respond because he's a Gen Z.
Okay.
Yes, but when you talk about corruption and you talk about participation of the youth or the Gen Z as we are calling them now, and the platforms that they can participate in, I want to correct you in one thing.
Yes.
That going to the streets is also a platform that has been rightfully given under Article 37 of the Constitution.
Yes.
So it is a right for us to, if you feel that you are not being heard, then the Constitution gives you that right to actually go and demand for it in the streets.
Yes.
So, but there are platforms, and I'm going back to my public participation conversations. So there are various platforms where we or the Gen Zs or the citizens have been given to air their views, to also just contribute towards the development processes.
Yes.
So usually this is what happens when government wants to make decisions concerning citizens or concerning anything that will affect citizens or Gen Zs, then they are required to provide a platform where they can get the views.
Yes.
So it could be a town hall, it could be a meeting that is organized to have these particular groups that will be affected giving their views on that. So what we are saying is that this has not been happening properly, and that is why many people resort to going to the streets.
Yeah.
So the platforms are there. Gen Zs can actually find time to follow procedures or processes of government, there are usually public participation notices that are called out every now and then. So we have those opportunities where now you can organize, mobilize yourselves, and then now contribute towards this conversation. The challenge will come when you are not heard, or when your decision is not taken, when your proposals are not taken into consideration, and you feel that you have not been given sufficient reasons as to why those proposals or reasoning were not taken into consideration. So I believe the platforms are there, but the challenge is we don't have feedback mechanisms to tell us why our proposals were not taken into account. And also us as Gen Zs, probably the information, there is a bit of information gap, but I've seen that now that Gen Zs are really coming up to generate information, to look for this information, and you can always partner with civil society organizations or institutions that have this information so that you can also utilize it in platforms where Gen Zs are needed to contribute towards conversations around development.
Wow.
Yeah. For me,
yes.
I believe it starts at the ballot as well. Gen Zs need to vote, and we need to take our votes right now. Like I don't believe in a situation where we don't vote or we don't vote appropriately, and then we start blaming the government. All right, we should take first responsibility, and that now follows with other provisions, including Article 37 and other petitions that are there. But also is that the government, at the same time, it is not upon the citizens that the government should do the right thing. The government should just do the right thing, whether citizens go to the street or not. You see, we should stop this fallacy that the government, we have to tell them what to do. They were rightly elected. They have a constitution to abide by this constitution. And this constitution clearly mandates them. If a politician does not appropriate the funds in a right way, that person needs to be jailed. We need to make sure that these systems are working. Politicians are able to respect the rule of law. Politicians are able to budget in a responsible way, in a way that is responsive to the citizens. I don't believe that the politicians should be sitting down and waiting for the citizens to hold them to account so that they can do the right thing. The essence of being a politician, the essence of being a leader is that by the virtue of not being elected, you know that you have, like the president, he has the power of the sword. The power of the sword is the power of life and death. All right? And every life of Kenyan is dependent on the decision that he's making when he wakes up, when he goes to sleep. If he makes a decision that allows people to steal every day 2 billion shillings, like the way we were told that we lose 2 billion shillings every day, all right, that is upon him. The buck stops with him, with the decisions that he makes. And also, you know, we are looking at a situation whereby money still comes in Kenya, even though there are cases of corruption. We still have, a government can go out there and they can get loan. They can go to the east, they can get billions of shillings. Whether that money comes to do the projects, whether that money comes to do whatever it was meant to do, they will still go out there another time and they'll get more money. And most of the time, these are bilateral loans. Sometimes these are commercial loans. They can go to the market and they can get this particular money. But also at the other time, these are bilateral agreements. A government agrees to facilitate Kenya to do particular projects. But then, these particular entities that are loaning Kenya money, they are not responsible enough to look or to oversee or to appraise this particular project that the government has done with their with their other loans and to see whether they qualify for more loans. But what we see is money still coming in, whether we appropriated that money in a right way. So we need more pressure from the international community. Hold this government to account. When they come to borrow, when they come to ask for more programs, when the president was in the US, the question of corruption did not come up as much as we wanted it to be. It is something that this government had not committed to when they were coming into power. Whereas we are told that we lose about 600 billion every year to corruption. That is amount of money that is needed to pay for university. That is amount of money that is needed to pay for healthcare. That is amount of money that is needed to pay for water. That is needed to pay for the development that we are not able to facilitate.
Yes. And so we'll be landing this plane in a short while.
Okay.
Maybe just to bring in the aspect of TI Kenya.
Yeah.
What is your role in matters transparency and accountability? even as we almost come to an end.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to add something in terms of Gen Z participation in these processes, just one, on the election process. Apart from the voting, Gen Zs also have an opportunity to elect their own.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we have that opportunity, like you can present someone who is a Gen Z, a youth, to be able to be elected, because we also have problems of leadership and integrity. The problems we are talking about here also emanate from the kind of leaders that we elect. So if you are thinking outside the box, is it possible for Gen Zs now to start thinking around having their own a person tried and tested that can be able to stand on the principles of leadership and integrity to be able to further these conversations around transparency and accountability. In terms of what TI Kenya is doing, there's a lot that we are doing as an organization to support anti-corruption work. One of the things that we do is awareness creation. That is just to sensitize the public or citizens on their rights, to sensitize them on what they need to do in terms of corruption issues, and that one comes with reporting corruption and also just ensuring that the corruption cases are followed up. So another thing that we do as an organization is research. This is meant to advance our work around evidence-based advocacy. When we want to talk about changes or structural changes that we want to bring, then we must have facts that we are talking about. TI Kenya engages in a lot of research. One of the researches that we do is called the bribery index, where we measure the level of bribery aspects in the country, so that then it can inform our actions, it can inform our decisions around corruption matters in Kenya. The other thing that TI Kenya does is, of course, on matters litigation. Particularly, we are interested in advocating or advancing conversations around leadership and integrity. It's at the heart of TI Kenya that we have responsible and accountable leaders. So we do litigation just to enhance conversations around promoting leadership and integrity, and looking at how appointments are being made, how people are being elected in the election processes. Do we have the right people who will further these conversations around development and service delivery in our country? So the other things that we do is, of course, collaborations with government institutions, just to see that we have proper laws, proper policies, and mechanisms to advance the fight against corruption.
Thank you. Pastor Joshua, in 30 seconds, less than 30 seconds, what will be your parting shot on this?
Yeah,
on this topic?
We also do Red Card campaign, where we tell citizens,
yes,
this person has been accused of multiple cases of corruption, so do not vote for them. That is one thing, a powerful tool that we do.
Okay.
My parting shot is that the power of taxes, that is our sovereignty. When our taxes are touched, when the conversation on taxes is a very important conversation. It's a conversation, it's a very bedrock of sovereignty. It's a very bedrock of social contract. And that is if the government cannot use our money properly, we should not pay taxes. You see, if they cannot account for the resources, we should not give them our money. In fact, the next movement should be, let us stop all the payee, let us stop all the VATs, let us stop all these taxes that we're doing, until the government can show accountability on what we've given them. That is my parting shot.
Thank you. Do you have a parting shot?
Yes. Thank you very much. I'd like to mention that these conversations are very critical. And of course, my parting shot is on the role of the citizen in these conversations, and how citizens can be able to build that agency in terms of holding governments accountable. We have the right in the Constitution as citizens of the Republic of Kenya to be able to hold our leaders accountable for the actions they are taking. So decisions around taxation, decisions around public finances, decisions around resources in the Republic, citizens must be at the center of it. And maybe the last one is about our integrity work that we have. I mentioned that we have strategies that we use to create awareness around corruption. And this month, on the 28th of September, TI Kenya has organized an integrity walk where we shall be just creating awareness on the effects of corruption, on matters access to information, and of course public participation in the country. So we shall be having our walk on 28th September at Uhuru Park. We shall
this coming Saturday.
The next Saturday.
Next Saturday.
Next 28th.
Okay.
Yeah, the next Saturday. And we are calling upon people or citizens of the Republic of Kenya to join us in this particular initiative so that we can enhance awareness.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pastor Joshua. Thank you, Elizabeth, for coming on this show. And that has been the Leader Show, courtesy of Evangelical Alliance of Kenya in partnership with Catalid. I've been your host, Lugalia Kelvin. Until next time, thank you.